so kind, staring out into space, asking God to hear my case, trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? With purple angel, purple angel, purple angel, you're next to me.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm Lori LeBay, the host and founder of Alzheimer Speaks. Before we get started, we always have new listeners, so I always just like to tell you a little bit about us. And bottom line, Alzheimer Speaks is an advocacy-based company providing multiple platforms to shift our dementia care culture from crisis to comfort worldwide. We believe that by joining forces and sharing knowledge and just having these everyday conversations about life with dementia, we're going to be able to remove the stigmas and the myths attached to memory loss and help people continue to live life with purpose. At our core, we believe that collaboration is the only way that we are going to be able to win the battle against dementia. And I know that that's working thanks to each of you. You see, it's your shares, your clicks, your likes that have gotten us recognized as the number one influencer online regarding Alzheimer's, according to ShareCare and Dr. Oz. So we really appreciate you taking the time. Even though it's just a couple of seconds, that impact is huge. There are so many people that we have in our own sphere of influence that are dealing with this disease but really don't talk about it. And the more we can get information out there for them to grab a hold of when they're ready, the easier it will be. So please continue to share with your Twitter tribes, your Facebook friends, your Pinterest peeps, your LinkedIn colleagues, and there's so many others out there in the social media ring. If you've got a blog, feel free to go ahead and reblog the information that we have, and don't just limit it either to the radio show. We also have a blog. We've got a YouTube channel. We do dementia chats, which are free webinars where our experts actually have dementia, and they give just wonderful insights in terms of living with the disease. I also want to give a shout out. I don't know if everybody out there knows about this company, but the Call Alert Center is just an absolutely fabulous system that you can use if you are a care partner, if you're a world traveler, if you have children or pets. But basically, it's a registry system where you can have information stored and at the ready in case anything would happen. If somebody went missing, pet or person, and they can get that disseminated within like 10 minutes. It's a pretty cool system, and we get pretty harried when there's a crisis at hand. So just keep that in mind. You can go to alzheimerspeaks.com and you'll be able to find a link to that right on our homepage. Today's show, we're going to be talking about holiday gift giving, and we're going to look at some of the best Alzheimer's and dementia products that are available to you through a company called Best Alzheimer's Products. And today we are lucky enough to have John Schmid with us, and he is the co-founder of Best Alzheimer's Products, which he basically started due to looking out for a friend, and he found it really difficult to find age and stage appropriate activities for a family friend. And through their research at Best Alzheimer's Products, they started off with a website and a blog, and then later into this store, which has just done wonders around the world. And it really does have the best Alzheimer's products online in a non-medical dementia therapy fashion. So welcome today, John. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you, Lori. How are you?
I am doing good, other than I forgot to introduce Pauline Gordon first, who's my co-host today. So let me backpedal here and introduce her. Pauline is living with dementia, and she just adds so much to the conversation here. So welcome, Pauline. Do you want to give people a little bit of your story, too?
Sure. I was diagnosed at age 57 with vascular dementia, and that's been about 4.5 years ago now. And I'm just involved in as many advocacy opportunities that I can find. It keeps me purposeful.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I'm looking forward to your insights as we talk with John for this next hour here. John, why don't you tell us a little bit more about what made you start your company? I mentioned that there was a friend, but are you willing to share a little bit more detail with our audience?
Of course, yeah. Her name was Bernice. She died about 3 years ago now, diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia, the Alzheimer's type. I'm thinking where to start. She's all over the internet now, her pictures and her stories, so it's not a bad thing to be talking about her. And I think Bernice, she was the type of woman that would appreciate it, that she's doing something to help others in her condition. But at one point in her life, she was older, about 80 years old at the time, we started noticing some things. And maybe the first thing we noticed was that every time we would call her, every time my wife Holly would call her to do something, to set up an appointment or a date for lunch or just to get together to talk, Bernice had to finish her paperwork. And this could go on for days and eventually even weeks that we couldn't get together with her because she had to finish her paperwork. Now, her paperwork was, reconciling her bank accounts and managing her investments, things like that. But she never seemed to finish. That was kind of the first clue. Now, a disease of the brain becomes dementia when it interferes with one's normal functioning, and something was obviously interfering with Bernice's. So, we looked closer, and eventually we did, get her some medical help. She was eventually diagnosed with Alzheimer's, probable Alzheimer's, and so she had no one else at the time. She had outlived her family. Even her son was, if not dead, at least unfindable. We looked. We spent a lot of time. The last we had heard, he was in California, but we were unable to locate him. So we became her primary care providers and her power of attorney.
Okay.
So we, I knew what Alzheimer's was, or at least very basically, but we had no idea what to expect. We had no idea how to care for somebody who had any kind of dementia. And we wanted to do the best we could for her. So we started studying, and that has turned into this business. I spent the last 12 to 15 years researching all of dementia, the diseases that cause dementia, the best care practices for dementia. And we have now not only this store, but a website/blog that we just keep writing. We thought that other people would probably find themselves in the same situation that we found ourselves in, and not really know what to do. And since we had such a difficult time finding things, we thought we'd make that easier.
Well, and it's funny how so many of us get into this space because it's so unknown, and you just want to help the next guy, through the process, because it is difficult when you don't have, when you don't know the next steps to take.
Oh, it's very difficult, and it's frightening too.
Yep, definitely. Now, John, you've devoted a lot of space on your website talking about gifting. Can you tell us why finding a gift for somebody with dementia or Alzheimer's is different for just, running out purchasing your regular old gift for the holidays?
Yeah, well, in a lot of ways, it is no different. You're looking for somebody or something that the user, the end user, the person with dementia is going to enjoy or get some benefit from. Now, I make that distinction. I'll come back to that later about the person, the end user. And it gets a little tricky in that it's difficult to know just what is going to bring joy or what's going to be useful at that time. If Mom used to do the New York Times crossword puzzle, for example, every week, it might be a good gift to get her a crossword puzzle book. But don't make a mistake of getting the New York Times crossword puzzle books. it's just going to frustrate her. It's going to be way too difficult, and it's going to frustrate her. And frustration can lead to anger and agitation and all of those things, all of those behavioral symptoms that can go with dementia.
I wanted to ask you, John, is there a certain stage that you are targeting, like early stage, mid-stage, late stage?
We're not. We're trying to do as much as we can for the entire spectrum.
Okay.
Early stage is probably one that's most difficult. Well, no, let me say it's the easiest to find for, because a person's going to be able to do many of the things that he or she has always done.
Right.
So, maybe just simplify things a little bit, but, they can still enjoy a movie or a decent novel, things like that become practically impossible in later stages.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. Pauline, have you had experience with maybe getting a gift that you just didn't feel was appropriate? I mean, I know that happens to all of us, period. At times you're thinking, what were they thinking? Well,
I was just thinking, as you were mentioning about the novel and that sort of thing, I would categorize myself as kind of mid-stage at this point. And it's very difficult for me to read a novel anymore because I can't keep track of it from one sitting to the next. So at this point, that would not be a good gift for me. Short, maybe magazine subscriptions or short articles, short stories, something like that would be more appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah, that's always also a problem with movies. It's hard to keep track of the beginning of a movie once you get to the middle and the end, and it just doesn't make sense then.
Yeah, and I think so many people have a hard time with that because and we hear this all the time. We have this discussion on Dementia Chats. People say, well, you look fine, and so if the outside package looks okay, well, then there can't be anything going on in the brain. Everything's just the way it was. And people really have to, pay attention and look a little deeper on those types of things. Because it is really important. Can you tell us why you feel it's important to provide special activities for somebody with dementia, and maybe what age or stage you're speaking to, and if there's a difference between them?
Yeah, there's absolutely a difference between them. Like I indicated, early stage very often can do many of the things that they've always done, and then in the very last stages, there's very little available. At that point, we recommend music, things that are tactily stimulating, things people can do with their hands. It's not so much that the activities are special; they're just activities that fit the situation. Mm-hmm. For example, we all get older, and as we get older, we find that there's things that we used to be able to do that we can't do anymore. I used to be a pretty decent sprinter, but not so much anymore. Mm-hmm. And it's the same with dementia. As it progresses, a person's abilities digress. They go in the opposite direction. So we have to keep up with that progression. Something should be challenging, but not overly challenging. It should be stimulating, but it should never be, never be to the point that it is frustrating. Mm-hmm. And it should also not be demeaning. That's important, but when I say it should not be demeaning, I mean it should not be demeaning for the person who has dementia. Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean that if the person's daughter thinks it might be demeaning, that doesn't mean it necessarily is. Mm-hmm. And we have to keep that in mind always. The person with dementia is the one that's important here. So,
John, how do you weigh that out? Because I think again that gets into the myths and the misconceptions of mm-hmm. the disease. So, how do you know that it's not the person buying its perceptions that might be wrong versus the person with dementia? What are signs that you look for there, or what should people look for in that situation?
Initial reaction to a gift. We'll take things back, as long mm-hmm. as they're not rude, we'll take things back. exchanges or refunds. But look at the initial reactions, and if this person is obviously turned off by something, then maybe you shouldn't be giving it to him or her at this point. It might be fine later. Dolls are one of our favorite therapies, actually. We have a nice selection of dolls in a big range of prices, in fact. But a doll, we've had people tell us that dolls have allowed them to take their mother, for example, off most of their medications. The medications that are given people to control their behavior. Other people who've been for months and longer, who've been totally non-communicative, all of a sudden start talking again. And not just with the doll, but with people around them once they have a doll in their arms. Now, yeah, a lot of people are going to think that a doll can be pretty demeaning for their parent. But, you can see right away if that parent holds the doll, talks to the doll, they're getting something out of it, and they're probably a lot more than is obvious at the point. So, you got to put your own sensibilities aside sometimes. Just let the person you're working with make the decisions. And something that is rejected today might be the best thing in the world tomorrow. So you never know.
Pauline, what's your feeling with doll therapy? Because I know that some people love it, and some people just think, hey, that's not an age-appropriate thing. What is your thought as a person living with dementia?
Well, as a person living with dementia, it wouldn't be something that would be appealing to me, but that's just me. I mean, that's just my personality, I think. The music you talked about, John, that's a really great thing. I think that's one of the best presents you can give. It redirects your attention. It is soothing. I just think that's one of the best things you can get. I was anxious to hear what other products you have.
Before we go there, I just want to ask a couple more questions on the doll therapy thing. John, do you find, because I would say, for me, let's say if I got dementia, I probably wouldn't think that I would want a doll, but do you find that as people progress and go back in time, that it's more of a natural fit and it's more of us outside judging if it's appropriate or not?
Sure.
Because of age. So I'm wondering, Pauline, what your thoughts are with that, because, what we pick right now in the state of mind that we're in might be something different as the disease progresses. Is that something that you'd like as an option so that people can find out really what does bring you joy as the disease progresses later on down the road?
Well, I think, again, you have to look back to a person's history and what they've been involved with in their life. I was never anybody. I know a lot of teenagers are anxious to be mothers and have babies, and they love babies and this kind of thing. I never was a person that was really crazy about babies. I mean, it was just my personality. So that's why I say, for me, it wouldn't be a good fit. I don't think at any stage. But again, you have to go back to what the person's personality was like, and if they really enjoyed cuddling with their babies, and everything like that, then maybe that would be a very appropriate thing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yep. Okay. John, do you want to go ahead and share some other types of gifts that Pauline had mentioned?
Oh, well, gifts should be fun, There are a lot of things that can aid in the care of somebody with dementia, like door alarms, to let you know when somebody opens the front door, or alarms that let you know when somebody's getting out of bed, things like that. But that's kind of like giving underwear to a 10-year-old, I think. Give the things that are fun. Give the games and the movies if that's appropriate, and things like that. Those are gifts. Those are gifts that will be appreciated. And again, give those practical stuff to the care providers.
Do you have watches?
Well, go ahead.
Oh, I was
I'm
going
sorry?
to say, do you have watches that help to orient people in terms
Watches?
of...
No, we don't.
Okay. Do you have a clock?
We do have a clock. Now, the clock we have is for later stages, and it basically, it's called a day clock, and it tells you not what time it is, but it tells you if it's morning or afternoon or evening or night. And very often that's as much as the person needs to know or even wants to know. There again, this is for later stages.
Well, I know even at my stage, I have a very difficult time with this. I go to fill out papers and they'll say, "What is the date?" And I'll ask somebody, "What is the date?" And they'll say the 15th. Well, that doesn't help me because I don't remember what month it is or the year. So I need the full thing. My husband, I've got him trained pretty well. But other than that, it would be nice to have something like that.
Do you carry a phone?
Yes.
Yeah, because that'll usually show you the time and the date and all of that information. We for a long time we didn't have any clocks because we didn't find any that we liked, that we thought were good for this population of people. They were confusing in regard to how they presented the date, for example. Sometimes they would flash, and that's as far as we're concerned, that's a bad thing. And so we just didn't think we should sell one of these. We wouldn't buy it, so we wouldn't sell it. But we did find this day clock, and we think that it does have a place. It does serve a good purpose.
Okay.
So you're looking for that type of thing to help the person. It's basically
oriented.
to help them. Right.
Or so many times you have to fill out paperwork and forms, whether they're insurance or different forms like that. And it just comes down to, it may seem silly to someone else, but to forget what month it is, but it's very common. And even the year can sometimes be, forgetful.
Right.
I know I've seen clocks that have the day of the week, the date, and the year, that type of thing. And I was just wondering if you did anything like that.
No, we don't. Those are readily available in many places. It's part of the reason that we don't sell them. We try to find things that are a little bit more unique and harder to find. If you're filling out paperwork, I would suggest that you just write that pertinent information down on a piece of paper. It'll be a lot more accessible to you and a lot more understandable than looking at the face of a watch or something each time that you have to know that.
Okay.
Yeah, the problem. The problem can be to remember to do that and then to bring it with you to what you need. On that in terms of following.
That can be done on the spot though too, or if you're at the bank or at your lawyers or something, you could even ask them to do it for you. I'm sure they'll understand.
Yeah.
It's just embarrassing sometimes
when
you have
understand.
to ask.
Sure.
It's like,
Yeah, and I think it's more and more common. I hear people just who are retired or on vacation. When I'm on vacation, I totally lose track of days and times, and even sometimes when I'm not, it's like, what day is it? Boy, the time went fast. I think in this fast-paced world, it's actually more common for people not to know than to know in a lot of ways, just because we get so regimented into looking at our phone, and if our phone's not there, we don't have it. Or if you have a Fitbit, you can kind of, cheat and get the time, but you still wouldn't know what date it is, or if you don't have your computer, because we've trained ourselves not to have to remember those things through technology.
Right.
And yet I can see how it would be even more difficult for somebody with dementia to find that. So that's interesting why you chose not to do certain clocks and things, so too, and not to have that as a product. Let's talk about the distinction between age and stage appropriate. What do you really mean by that? And do you feel that one outweighs the other?
Yeah, I do. I'm very opinionated on that, as a matter of fact. The example I gave of Bernice in her bookkeeping is a good example of an activity that is age appropriate. it's age appropriate for someone who is at the age she was at the time. Most people at that age handle that fine, and before her Alzheimer's disease had progressed to the point that it had, she could do it fine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an age-appropriate activity for a person in their early 80s, which she was at the time. Another age-appropriate activity might be, for example, a game of chess, which is a difficult game. It requires thinking and planning and strategy and memory also, and those are things that most dementias will affect eventually, and chess will become not so good a game, even though it's age appropriate. So those two things are no longer stage appropriate. They're not appropriate to the stage of the dementia that the individual is in. Let me see that should be enough example.
Do you offer a guide for your customers, like a catalog or something that kind of guides them?
Yeah, on our website we have different categories. One of our ways of categorizing is by stage. We have suggestions for early stage, for middle stage, and for late stage. So you can go there and get a better idea of what that might be. It can be difficult, if you're caring for mom or dad. It can be difficult knowing what stage they're in. We do give on our website some help in doing that, but if there's no doubt that a loved one has dementia, they need to be in medical care anyway, and you can get some help also on the stage from the family doctor.
I would have to interject that I question how much the family doctor is really going to help, because we've had many discussions on the lack of resources that many give.
What you need to find is a doctor that really understands the syndrome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and will take the time to help you with resources.
Right.
Pauline, do you have any comments about the doctor piece?
Well, I'd agree too. I don't know that that's the first place I would look. Maybe sometimes the psychologists or psychiatrists are a little bit more helpful than the neurologists. But that would be the way I would go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but back to the age versus stage appropriateness, I've always said that the stage appropriateness is a bigger concern. You want to have something, again, that is challenging, but it has to be doable also. Otherwise, it's just getting in the way. It's just frustrating. Age appropriate is an age appropriate activity can be frustrating, and very often will be, especially as the disease progresses. So the trick is to find something that is both age and stage appropriate. And when we started, that was a hard thing to do. So we started, we found games that were basically designed for children, but that weren't necessarily demeaning. For example, a 30 or 50 piece puzzle, a jigsaw puzzle, might be at the perfect level of difficulty for someone. But if it's got a picture of SpongeBob SquarePants on it, for example, it could be demeaning. It could be seen as offensive.
Mm-hmm.
So we looked for those activities that were easy enough, but appeal to an adult's sensibilities. Now it's much better. Now we have one line of puzzles that is specifically made and cut for people with dementia. They use the puzzle. The company uses the pictures that they use for adult puzzles that they'll cut into, 500 or 1,000 pieces, and they cut them into 35 pieces. And they call them puzzles to remember.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're aware of those.
Oh, with Jay and Snyder. Yep. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's wonderful. Yeah, and aren't they a little bit thicker and stuff too to be able to pick up?
No, those aren't. Those are pretty much standard. The board that they're put on. There are puzzles available that are thicker. We have had some in the past. We don't carry that presently for various reasons. But there were very few things that were created or were designed for this population 10 years ago, 12 years ago when we started looking. That's changing. Almost monthly, you can find new products that specifically address particular problems of dementia.
John, do you think it might be helpful to have a questionnaire that you could ask your loved ones questions to get to what they would really like?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That might be helpful to somebody who's purchasing a gift or trying to purchase a gift. Just some questions that they might ask.
Yeah, I'm going to think about that. It's almost too late to do anything this year for the Christmas holidays, but yeah, that's a good suggestion.
Another product I just wanted to ask you about are color. Do you sell coloring books for?
We do. We do have one, and we're looking for others. So many of the adult coloring books now are just too busy. And so we haven't found too many that we like. We're actually in the process of putting some designs together to print our own. And the one we have is kind of our own. Our partners in Europe did it, so it's kind of ours. But I'm glad you mentioned that. Coloring is a great activity for care provider and care receiver to share in. Each of you take a page and color. It's as we are beginning to understand that process is meditative and will benefit both parties. And it is. It's very involving. And it reminds me a long time ago when we first started caring for Bernice. Holly took her a coloring book. Now Bernice was a little funny in some ways. She didn't want to make mistakes. It was hard to get her to try new things, although we were able to do that. But Holly asked her if she'd like to color, and she said, "No, I don't think so." So Holly put the coloring book aside, and they talked for a while. And a little while later, Holly opened the coloring book and picked up a crayon and started coloring. And Bernice obviously got really involved, in watching her color. And Holly asked her if she would like to try. She said, "No, you're doing good." And she said, "Well, what color do you think I should make this?" And so the rest of the picture was completed with Bernice choosing the color and Holly doing the actual coloring. And when they were done, it was as though Bernice had done it herself, or at least, she felt that this was her picture now, which is, you can't ask for too much more than that in an activity, or to have the pride in completion. So sometimes you've got to just play things by ear.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to add with coloring was that it really bypasses any age standards too. I remember my mom used to really enjoy coloring with my daughter. And, she was probably 4 or 5, and they just had a ball together, and so it really goes for all generations. And I think there's, it's proven to be relaxing and, all of that as well. So, which is great to everybody.
So there's a great example of an activity that's both age and stage appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Pauline, any specifics you want to add regarding coloring? I don't know if you've done any yourself or.
Oh, I do it quite a bit. I have mandalas. I do. There's all kinds of design books anymore that have come out, and I do find it, as John said, very meditative. It really calms me down, and it kind of distracts me from all of the problems or the things that are going on around me. And it just gives me a very peaceful feeling and a sense of accomplishment, too. When you're finished, you have something that you can say, I made that, and look how beautiful it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it puts you in the moment, doing what you're doing. And that is why we think that these activities, especially these fun activities, are so important. It puts a person in the moment, as opposed to worrying about yesterday or thinking about tomorrow, which very often someone with Alzheimer's can't do.
Yep, exactly. Why don't we talk a little bit about, let's see, what our audience should be looking for in terms of, appropriate activities. Do you have some ideas when they're, what should they be looking for in terms of characteristics of a person, or, I know you don't have any guided questions right now, but can you think of some right off the top of your head that might be helpful to, pull together for people to utilize, maybe next year, but just any comments off the top?
Well, always look first at things that interested that person earlier in their life or their lives. A lot of people who were in the business world, bankers or whatever, will spend their days dressed up, sitting in front of a desk and doing things that make them feel like they were, working 20, 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's meaningful for them and definitely beneficial. We always say look for things that are stimulating. Now, that's pretty broad. Most anything, activity by its nature is stimulating. But there's a lot of different ways to stimulate. You can stimulate a person cognitively, their thought processes. Games and puzzles do this really well. You can stimulate the senses. Everything, of course, stimulates the senses, but really specifically stimulate the senses. The sense organs connect directly to the brain. Anything that stimulates the eyes, for example, stimulates the brain. Anything that stimulates the receptors in the fingertips stimulate the brain, and that's what we're looking for, that brain stimulation, because we can slow down the progression of a disease like that. We can actually, they're finding, grow the brain, certain areas of the brain, especially the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory, can create new cells, and that's through stimulation. So sensory stimulation is brain stimulation, very important. Exercise is something to always look for. We need to keep our bodies as healthy, or their bodies as healthy as possible. It eliminates, or at least reduces, the risk of falling and injury, but also it stimulates the brain in as a result of blood circulation and oxygenation and things like that. Stimulate creatively, and the music does this, the coloring does this. The creative centers of the brain are some of the last to be affected by most dementias. So always do that. And getting back to an earlier question, in terms of finding what is an appropriate activity for anyone, sometimes it's something they've never done before. A lot of people start painting after they're diagnosed with dementia, and many do a real good job of it. But all feel good about it, and that's your point. Something that they can do creatively that they feel good about and feel good about themselves.
John?
And another one is...
Mm-hmm. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, another one is just things that are relaxing. It's important for all of us that we relax and get our minds off everything else. As Pauline said about the coloring, she just doesn't think about anything else while she's doing that. And that's important too. Listening to music can be very relaxing, but it's also, there's a lot going on when we listen to music. I actually have, I think on my website, some pictures, some MRIs of the brain that's listening to music. And it's like watching a fireworks display. all the different parts of the brain lighting up as these different parts are stimulated by the music. So, yeah, stimulate all of those areas whenever possible.
Let's talk about alternative therapies and what you have to offer for like aromatherapy, art. We talked about doll, but light. We've talked a little bit about music, reminiscence, and just sensory stimulation. Can you tell us if you've got products that coincide with all of those?
Oh, yeah. Actually, we say on the front page of our store, we say dementia therapy without drugs, because that's one of our things is to get people off the use of drugs. The drugs that are used for controlling behavior. These alternative therapies, as we call them, can do just as good a job, sometimes a better job, than the drugs. And it's certainly a better job when you consider that they're not having the nasty side effects of the drugs. So, yeah, we basically list our alternative therapies as aromatherapy, art therapy, doll therapy, light therapy, music therapy, reminiscence therapy, and then I put in sensory stimulation because that too is therapeutic. Now, again, every one of those others feed into sensory stimulation. Everything that we know, everything that we do stimulates the senses.
So can you give people examples of each of those, though, John? A lot of people don't know what those are.
Sure. Now, aromatherapy is based on essential plant oils.
Mm-hmm.
Aromatherapy has been, it's been around for millennia. The ancient Greeks and Egyptians used these oils for therapeutic effect. Now, there are several oils that have been studied specifically with people who have dementia. Lavender and lemon balm are two of the best examples of that. Both of these are calming. They soothe and balance emotions, and they'll promote a better mood, to help sleep, just relaxation in general. Rosemary is an example of a plant oil that will actually aid memory. I mean, they've studied these, and there is indication that it will actually improve memory. Those are probably the most, let's say I would recommend those three above others. Peppermint is a stimulant, it can be used to stimulate diet or to stimulate eating. That's often a problem. People with dementia often forget to eat or don't feel that they're hungry because they're losing that part of the brain that tells them, that signals that they're hungry. Mm-hmm. But that's aromatherapy. Now, there's ways to use it. You can put it in what is called a carrier oil. That would be like a coconut oil or something, and use it as a massage oil. There are diffusers that will atomize it into the air to be breathed. You can rub it directly into the skin, but that's not always recommended. So there's a lot of ways to use that, and I suggest that if it sounds like something you're interested in, to look at our website. We do talk about it quite a bit there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all for aromatherapy. I think that's a wonderful thing, and the lavender is very calming. And
good.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful thing. But that again is just something that is particular to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It is particular to you, but it's particular to a lot of people also. And again, you make that point. Yeah, none of these things are going to work for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them will work for a few people. Some of them will work for a lot of people. But not any of it will work for everyone. Light therapy is a similar thing. One of the problems that dementia causes is sleep problems. You get a lot of wandering, a lot of sundowning, and things like that. And that's because that part of the brain that regulates our time sense gets confused. And the light therapy helps reset that. That's, our rhythms that are set by us. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And it's a funny word, but it's what regulates our time sense so that we know it's day and we know it's night, and we all basically live by a 24-hour time cycle, but that gets confused very often with dementia. Art therapy and music.
Do you often offer those light therapies?
Yeah, we do have a therapy light. We found one that is fairly inexpensive, fairly powerful. It needs to be powerful. It needs to be full spectrum light. Okay, so white, basically. So it can't just be any light. It has to be a specific light source.
Right. Okay.
And again, it's we have one. They're available in a lot of other places, but it should be the light output is measured in lux, and I think it should be 5,000 to 10,000 lux. Now, I won't get into what lux is because I'm not sure I'd be able to tell you anyway. But it's a measure of the light intensity. And the other thing is that it should be a full spectrum white light.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you have a lot of sensory things that people can purchase. Can you explain some of those and how they work?
Yeah. Again, let me back up. Not anything that stimulates the senses is good. You don't want to overstimulate. We used to have a ball that when you bounced it, it would flash. And this was when we had just started, and we talked with somebody who is now a friend who's, because of this, in the Alzheimer's Association in Iowa, and she said, this might not be a good idea to have that flashing light. That can set off some things that you don't want. It can be confusing. It can be just one of those things that you don't want. So you don't want to overstimulate, but a slowly blinking light or a light that changes color slowly can be very good. A lot of the things that are specifically sensory stimulating that we have are, let me say, they're just kind of simple things, things that will move and change color, and they're available in many places. So we don't sell a lot of them, so we don't carry a lot of them, but we will, we recommend all kinds of things.
And you do have a lot of DVDs, so people can watch different scenery and things like that.
Yeah, and those are sensory stimulating, as is everything. But yeah, we have a whole section of those.
Mm-hmm.
They are mostly just nature scenes set to music. So you have the music and you have the visual stimulation, and you don't have the confusion of a narration or of a storyline to get in the way.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a few other DVDs that do have a narration. For example, we have a set of decade DVDs that 40s, 50s, 60s, etc., that talk about things that happened in those respective decades. Does have a storyline,
mm-hmm.
And
That's
they're better off for people in earlier. Yeah, they're neat. They're really well done, but more appropriate for people in early middle stage.
Mm-hmm. What are the sharpen your senses cards? What are those?
They're just activity. They're activity cards.
Mm-hmm.
They make suggestions about what might or what has in the past looked good to you or smelled good to you. Without having them right in front of me now, mm-hmm. It's hard for me to give you an example of that.
Okay, I just pulled it up. So, like for example, it's got
No,
some
I
sounds.
understand.
Some sounds are
Yeah, we have.
relaxing. Name 3 sounds that have a relaxing effect on you.
Yeah.
Or we all eat certain foods on the holidays. And turkey is associated with Thanksgiving. What foods are associated with the 4th of July? So some open-ended type questions with
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah, and we have a set of games that does a very similar thing. The shakeout, we call them the shakeout games. There's 5 of them. Shake Loose a Memory is the original. And, nicely named, but it has similar things, questions about, like, did your mother bake bread when you were young, or did you buy it at the store? Things like that. Just things to shake loose a memory. But then they came out with 4 others. They're Shake Out the Truth, the Shake Loose More Memories, which is a sequel, and a couple others. Shake Up the Relatives, and Shake Awake Your Senses is the 5th.
Okay.
So that too is going to the senses.
Okay, and you have a lot of games, and you have like packaged games too that people can buy, kind of almost like a bucket of things. So there's really quite a bit here on the website, and a lot of really good articles as well. And it looks like you even have a little clearance section, which everybody always likes to shop the outlet.
Very often that's damaged goods or things that we're no longer going to carry. So yeah, we put them on clearance, and people love to go to the clearance section. Okay.
I noticed that you have on your website a section for caregivers. Do you have gifts for caregivers?
They're not so much gifts, but there are gifts for caregivers, like lotions and things like that. But these are more like I was talking about earlier, where you have safety alarms and things like that. That would be more appropriate for a caregiver. That would help them in their job as caregivers to provide the care. But we also have books, that are informational, books that help a caregiver understand the disease and things like that. Things that we were looking for, 12 and 15 years ago when we started to care for Bernice. We have other books as well, activity books and things like that are specifically for the person with dementia.
Okay.
And we have books for reminiscing, which is great. Reminiscence is another great therapy. Get people to remember their past. They're well, not in all dementias, but in Alzheimer's certainly, it's those recent memories that get lost really quickly. Somebody could have a problem remembering what they had for breakfast, and you remember clearly what they did 30, 40 years ago. And that's reminiscence, and you always want to work with those reminiscences whenever possible, and get them to explain, get them to extrapolate, and get into those memories as much as possible.
Okay.
Someone recently said something to me about they were talking about photo albums, and so forth as a good memory tool. But they mentioned that you should always just have like one picture on a page, as opposed to having multiple pictures, because it would be more distracting.
Oh, sure. Yeah. More than one thing is always a little confusing, even for me, I know. But we have a great picture album that is recordable. So you can put a picture on a page and you can make a recording, either the person who's remembering or the daughter can record what she remembers about that picture, or the whole family can remember. It's actually a great album that we have, because there's 200 minutes of total record time. These are available in a lot of places, but very often you get 9 or 10 seconds of record time per page. These have an average of 10 minutes, and you can divide that up however you want. So that's a lot of time. You can really get into something there, and that's a great seller for Christmas for this time of year.
Now, John, you also have what's called talking tiles. What are those?
Well, that's actually made by the same company that makes the photo album.
Okay.
And those are just little, basically they're little buttons. They're probably about 3.5 inches across that you can put a recording on, and you can put a label on. And every time that button is pushed, it will replay whatever you have recorded on there. So you might put a label on it that says, "See you for dinner," and then put a recording that says, "Hey, Mom, I'm at work now. I'll be home at 6 o'clock, and we'll have dinner."
Okay.
You know, questions like that are very often repetitive. When are you going to be home? When are you going to be home? You know, every 5 minutes. When are you going to come home? So, you know, if they have that button to push, that can be helpful in that regard, especially if you're not there.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, that's something that is an issue for me as well. I have my technique, since I don't have anything fancy, is a little whiteboard with a pen. I have my husband write on there all the time where he went and when he's coming home.
Yeah, you want to know those things, don't you?
Yeah.
And,
yes.
And if you forget, it's not easy to get that memory back. So yeah, anything like that, any aid like that is going to be helpful.
Okay.
But yeah, these are all what we call aids for daily living. You know, things that help you get through the day. Do those things that all of us do every day and take for granted.
Yeah.
Can't any longer take some of these things for granted.
Well, John, we have about 4 minutes left here. Do you want to just tell us a little bit I know you've taken a lot of time studying and looking at different activities. Have you ever given any thought to making your own at all for products?
Yeah. In fact, we're in that process now. We're working with our partners in Europe to get a few things going. We never find enough games. So we've got some good ideas for games, as well as some other types of products. Now, it's a slow process, and one that we weren't too familiar with when we got started, and now we are finding out that it's involved and it's slow. We were hoping we'd have at least a few things ready by now, but those should be available shortly within the new year. Okay. We're ready with a couple of them to basically get them, finish up the last few details and get them sent off to the factory and have them made. So yeah, we do. We've got a couple of things. A box of balls it was actually one of our first products that we gave to Bernice when she broke her wrist. These are all squishy balls that we put in a box, and it got her exercising and moving and getting the feeling and the use back for her hand. So we package that and sell that. And then we have a Busy Bee lap pad, which is basically it's like an activity apron that has a weighted pad inside. Mm-hmm. So you get the additional benefit of that weight, which is, great sensory feedback. Mm-hmm. So those are a couple of things that we do have, but those are only available through us. They're not priced or they're not costed well enough for us to be able to make them available to others for resale.
Okay, great. And
so yeah, we're going in that direction now finally.
Okay, wonderful. And the best way for people to get a hold of you is just go to bestalzheimersproducts.com. Is that correct?
That's our website.
Okay.
That's our website. You can get to our store from there. They're separate websites. Mm-hmm. But if you right at the top, there's a little button that says shop, so you can go there. Plus, most of the pages on the website have buttons to the store for specifics. Mm-hmm. And that's the best way. My email address is there. Our phone number is there, so we're always available. Well, I shouldn't say that because we sleep also, but we're often available. We're usually available to talk on the phone or if you email us. So.
Okay, great. Pauline, any last minute comments?
No, I've enjoyed it very much, and if you ever want to field test any of these products, I'd be happy to field test them for you.
Yeah, you know what? I can contact you through Lori.
Sure.
Yeah, because when we start getting our new products in, that's a great suggestion.
Yeah, wonderful.
We're going to need to do that.
Great.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to go over all of this with us.
Well, thank you, Pauline. It's been a pleasure. It really has.
Wonderful. Again, I want to thank both of you for being with us. I thought it was a great conversation, and we got to be able to talk about a variety of gift giving, the ages versus the stages, and kind of breaking down some of those myths, what to look for in a person when you're giving a gift as well. For those of you who are new to Alzheimer's Speaks, we always have all of our archive shows available to you. So last week we had a show called Family in Dementia entitled Brought to Our Senses, and we talked with an author who has a book entitled Brought to Our Senses. We also had another author on who wrote a book called Clueless, A Journey Through Alzheimer's Caregiving, and both just were great conversations in terms of the family dynamic. And then prior to that, we had a couple of shows regarding music and reminiscing, and I think those are well worth the listen as well. As far as our Dementia Chats goes, which are interviews that you can see, those are video interviews. The last one we did was Dementia and Caring for Pets, talking about is it a good fit? And all of our experts actually have dementia, so it's really a wonderful way to get insights from them, not only in terms of having a pet in your own home, but even if you're visiting a pet, how that could affect somebody with dementia, both pros and cons. As far as upcoming screenings of the film His Neighbor Phil, on January 7th, I'll be in St. Therese in Woodbury, Minnesota. On January 26th, I will be at Gable Pines, also in Minnesota. And then on March 6th and May 20th, I'll be back at St. Therese in Woodbury, again, showing that film. If you didn't see the big special edition in USA Today, which was just on Monday, they had a big section on fighting Alzheimer's, and it's this huge campaign. Maria Shriver is part of that, and many others as well. But check that out. If you don't know where to go, just go to my homepage, and there's a couple of different articles there. One will give you to the whole campaign, and then there are a couple articles that were highlighting Alzheimer's Speaks. One is through the USA Today campaign, and another is through Maria Shriver's Architect of Change as well. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. And, check out Alive and Social, which is our network here. And one of the things that might be kind of fun, especially for the holidays, is to check out What's for Dinner Tonight with Rachel Perrin, who is the culinary director for Kowalski's Markets here in Minnesota. And she does a show with her sidekick, Adam Lee. And they talk about all kinds of stuff about seasonal flavors and favorite foods and trending topics with nutrition. And you can get, in this short podcast, which usually only lasts 10 to 15 minutes, some great menu ideas. And you can always go to Kowalskis.com for complete menus as well. And that's www.kowalskis.com. Have a brilliant holiday season, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye now.
Hey everybody, Jared Sebestier, host of Retire Repurposed. This podcast is dedicated to help people transition into fulfilling and purposeful retirements. Retirement is a big life change. In fact, the two most dangerous years of a person's life are the year they were born and the year they retire. Few people could just flip the switch from working a career 30 or 40 plus years, retiring on Friday, without methodical steps to living what we call a repurposed retirement. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.